Thank you for attending this press conference. Last week, President Ali held a press conference, and I'm so disappointed that instead of focusing on the substantive issues he addressed, that an entire section of the media has just been focused on a few issues of a personal nature rather than reporting on the important things for the country. So I've looked at what was said, and I was hoping that we would have had, for the benefit of the people of this country, some analysis of the issues which are important for the development of our country done. But what did we get? So we had the media, particularly a section of the media, talking about, first of all, how long the president's press conference must be and how much time he should speak for. Now that is arrogance on the part of these media houses. The president is the chief executive of this country. He took the time to speak about major issues that are important for this country. But they want to fashion how his press conference is being, what form it should take and how it's being held. So he should only speak for a few minutes and then allow reporters to get the rest of the time. Well, the times have changed now, and maybe it's time that we don't call this press conferences any longer. Because with the era of social media, whenever the president speaks, or anyone for that matter, there's a whole slew of people out there who can directly hear what the president or the presenter, the person who's convening the press conference, is saying. And this is important today in this era, particularly when you have sections of the media that will never intermediate truthfully what is being said at these press conferences. So if people didn't have that direct view and listen directly to the presenter and had to go through a newspaper like the Kaichor News, they would think that it was totally, they would get a totally different picture of what was said at the press conference. In fact, they would see a major distortion of what was actually said. So thank God for social media, that people can now see directly and listen to the presenters at the press conference. And I'm sure that thousands, tens of thousands of Guyanese listened directly to the president. And then they saw what was reported, and they saw the gaping gap in between what he said and what was reported. So we had issues about abuse of media personnel, dominating the whole media, and particularly coming from a person who lacks credibility, because Nazima Raghubir couldn't wait to weigh in on this matter. She has no credibility in the press association itself. We saw the controversy over and the lack of accountability on their part when they had their elections. And she now started off by saying a number of things. So she wasn't content with vilifying the president and distorting what he said, but she said she couldn't leave me out of it, that I also abuse a Starbuck News reporter, a Kaichor News reporter, because that reporter, because that newspaper mistakenly published a picture of a Chinese individual, the whole Sue affair. That was, first of all, I did not abuse the reporter, but you would recall that that reporter was insistent here, wanted me to comment on so-called Sue's presence at a party's activity. And when I said, why don't you check with Mansour Nadir and Clement Rohi, because she claimed they were at that activity and this individual was there, she said, I saw him personally, I was there. That is what she said, that she saw the person personally. Now that was dishonesty. If you have a dishonest reporter, and when we respond to that, how could that be abuse? That was total dishonesty. And they never apologized for the dishonesty. They just said, oh, we published the wrong picture. So, to present that as, oh, we are abusing reporters, or the president was abusing a reporter. The next thing they said, that the president dodged plans on increasing spending power of citizens. And I'm sure that the president is getting tired of these questions that we keep answering over and over and over again. And we are human beings too. Sometimes we get just frustrated when the same question comes up a million times and you give the answer all as though we're brain dead, as though we're senile. And you just wonder, you just become irritated because the answers have been given on numerous occasions. How many times have we not spoken about increasing disposable income in this country? Just the week before I left for Canada, I shared with media houses this document, and I asked that they publish it. They did not publish it. I pointed out how the public sector, disposable income in the public sector grew between 2014 and 2019, and then from 2019 to 2024, the changes that were made. We showed how massive the changes were, that it was double in nominal terms, nearly $40 billion more people got over that period, over the 5 years that APNU was in office. And they talk about helping the public sector, loving the public sector, and this government hates the public sector. But the public sector increases in this country have grown by $89.5 billion in the period between 2019 and 2024. That is how much money we budgeted for central government, public enterprises, and the statutory bodies. $89.45 billion increase in the allocation to public sector employees. Now, if you take out some taxes from that, that's all just because you have to take out taxes to talk about disposable income spending power. That is how much in the public sector alone the spending power of public servants grew in the last 4 years under the PPP. By $89.5 billion in the public sector alone. We pointed out if you add to that the 15,000 people who were hired by the government on part-time jobs, that's another $10 billion that they receive in income. If you look at the children and the cash grant, that's close to another $10 billion in disposable income available to their parents. If you look at the increase in pensions, that's close to $20 billion increase. So when you talk about 20 billion for the pensioners and those receiving public assistance, 10 billion for their children, another 10 billion for the part-time workers, you're talking about $40 billion in benefits there alone. And then another $89.5 billion in growth in public sector wages, you're talking about $130 billion. And you keep asking, and this is only from the budget. This is only for public initiatives, because mirroring public initiatives are private initiatives. So we have about 50,000 people now in the private sector who didn't have jobs, now having jobs. If you just say one person is earning $75,000 a month, that's low, but we're putting it at $75,000 a month. The people who were not working before but are now working would earn $42 billion more per year. That is disposable income that they didn't have in 2020 because they didn't have jobs. Now they have, and that's private sector alone. And I am being very, very conservative. Added to the 130 billion in the public sector for only a few categories, because I'm not talking about everything in the public sector. I just listed 4 categories: wages and salaries, children grant, the pensioners' money, and the part-time jobs. And you keep asking about how has disposable income grown, and what do you plan to do? We have done that. We have done it through various initiatives. And the housing, when the president talks about housing, we've pointed out also that we're spending $200 billion on developing 40,000 house lots. It costs about $5 million to develop one house lot, to fill up the land, to put in a road, to put in the water, the electricity, and all of those things, the infrastructure. But we're selling this land at a fraction of the price. Isn't that transfer of wealth to people? I saw someone saying, oh, the land was always there, don't take credit for it. Well, under APNU, it was there too. Why didn't they transfer it to the people? But that's another $200 billion going to people, but in a different fashion. It's not going as disposable income, but it's satisfying another basic need of our people. Because now they have 40,000 Guyanese will own a plot of land that they did not have before. So I can go on. That's why people become a little bit irritated. But no one, the media, doesn't want to focus on these things, or some elements in the media. They want some of them want a scandal. Oh, so the president must talk about the interest rates alone for Exxon, not about all the things that his government is doing. And so what did the president actually say that is important for the people of this country? He went into, you can't run a country by every day storing the same issue. It's a brain-dead sort of environment. So this president spoke about the growth in the financial system, financial sophistication, financial expansion, the strengthening regulation, ensuring greater financial literacy, more instruments available to ordinary people to finance their activities. And he spoke about that extensively. Now, this is an important thing for the country. But what happened? Nobody has reported much on that. I looked at the reports. It just passed over. Not a single thing, or very little, has been reported on all of the measures that the government took and is taking and will take to ensure that our financial system mirrors the growth taking place in the real sector of the economy, so that it doesn't become a humbug to future growth. Because if financial sophistication lags behind real sector growth, then it becomes a drag on the future development of the country. And that is what he pointed out there extensively. The president spoke about the digitization of our society and our economy, moving to a paperless economy, which is also a very important major issue that we're tackling that would help to deepen financial sophistication, which is through digital wallets and better credit intermediation, lowering of the cost of credit, etc., but would also help us in so many other areas of the economy. One, healthcare. Two, in security, in making sure people are more secure through the paperless society, the digitization, the biometrics program that we are working on that would allow us to run various systems, an e-education system, an e-health system, an e-security system, built on that infrastructure that we are now putting in place. The infrastructure of collecting biometrics and also rolling out technology across the country through these cameras, a whole range of other things. How much was reported on this? Very little was reported on that, although it is an important aspect of future development. You don't hear APNU talk about these things. They're more interested in just the day-to-day issues. Anyhow, I'm not going to deal with them at this point in time. So the president then spoke about small business support and the extensive changes that we are putting in place to support small business. We have done that through the incentive regimes in place. We have put in place a system where more people have received direct transfers from the government. We have done this through co-investment in some areas to allow small business growth, and we have seen a proliferation, thousands of new startups, small businesses, even contractors. We've had about 2,000 new contractors who have been bidding below $15 million for small works. Almost all those concrete roads in the villages around the country, etc., in all the regions, are done by small contractors, getting them a toehold in the system. They get like a small stretch of road to do, and you've seen this. You've gone around the country and you've seen how many people have now been part of this growth in getting more people in the system. The president spoke about the strengthening of the AML-CFT Act, very important for keeping our system safe from illicit money, which is vital. We have a sound financial system, and we want to keep it in that way. And that's why we are in the forefront of strengthening the regime to ensure that we do this, but at the same time, by doing this, that we do not harm financial intermediation, nor should we keep people away from using the banking system, because sometimes, especially for small people, it becomes onerous. He spoke about the low carbon development strategy and about the leading changes, global changes, that this government has put in place We are leading the world by example on this matter. Very little got reported on this. He spoke about social sector improvement. Very little got reported. So my point is that these issues could have been dealt with differently. The president had his press conference. Mazima Raghubir wants 5 reporters to come to the press conference. We allow that here. This is a party press conference. You go to the White House when the president has a press conference and find out how many persons get accredited from a news agency. Might be 1. Some news agencies do not get accredited to go to the White House at a presidential press conference. Does it mean that the United States of America or President Biden or whoever is the president there, that they're hostile to the media? But then here in Guyana, they want to set that as a standard. So we will always get this hostility from people like the GPA or Nazima Raghubir because they're aligned against the PPP with others. They've always done this. And so no matter what President Ali does at his press conference, we will always get mischaracterized by these individuals. But we don't work for Raghubir or the others. It's for the country. And we will not be steered into saying what they want us to keep the focus on by ignoring all the positive things that are happening in this country. We have a duty to tell the people about our stewardship of the economy and the country, and our stewardship is sophisticated. It's not a one-issue stewardship. And we're proud of the record in this regard. So there's been a lot of issues raised about procurement. And so today I just want to go through a few issues. It seems as though, again, I have to take this. I'm expecting a call from abroad, so I may have to step out for a few minutes. It's important. So there are thousands of contracts every day that's being done. If you go to anywhere in this country, you'll see schools being built, hospitals under construction, sea defenses being rebuilt, roads being built everywhere, bridges being built. The whole country is being transformed, infrastructure-wise. There are tens of thousands of ongoing contracts around the country to get this done in every region of Guyana. They never get focused on when these tens of thousands of contracts are completed and people enjoy the benefit of it and they're completed on time and the country moves forward. There is a proclivity now to focus on a few contracts, the few that may have some issue, and make that seem as the prevailing condition. So we have had this before. We have had it when, in the 2015 period, when they tried to characterize the People's Progressive Party as being corrupt. And so they're at it again. The same Starbuck News now says, short of US sanctions, it is unclear what it will take for President Ali's administration to recognize the cesspool of corruption that has overtaken a public procurement system. Now, I've never seen this sort of strong position in the 5 years under APNU, when there was practically no public tender, when ministers were directly involved in their ministries in giving themselves contracts. So there was no public tender, so there was no document to evaluate. There was no evaluation, there was no paper trail, so you couldn't investigate anything. In every one of these contracts that they have highlighted, Starbuck and Kaichor News, there is a paper trail, there's a process, and there are documents to support it. Every single one of them. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is to put my neck on the block for evaluators or the probity of every contract in this country. And we remain open to ensuring that the process grows in terms of transparency and that we can weed out people who are engaged in corrupt practices. And we have done so on several occasions. We have seen the growth of the system. So, but the newspapers also have an obligation not to be anecdotal. So let me just, I've asked yesterday when I was coming to this, I knew I'm coming to press conference, so I got back from Canada, and I saw this thing about award to carriers, with a $2.1 billion Guyana Defense Force project that is the wharf to this company. So I saw it written up in the Starbuck News and then in the Kaichor News today. So I asked the tender board about the project. I called and said, what happened here? Which I suspect anyone could have done. So I thought we had given the contract in this case to a high bidder. So they just issued, I said, why don't you issue a release? And the release just came out. So first of all, there were 8 bidders through open public tender for this process. 8 bidders. Let's get to some facts. One bidder, the highest bidder, bid 126% above the engineer's estimate. So the engineer's estimate was $2.6 billion. Ivor Allen bid $5.9 billion. The second bidder was 116% above the engineer's estimate. So, $2.6 billion engineer's estimate, Basu bid $5.6 billion. Then the next bidder, 97% above the engineer's estimate, it's there, which is the bidder bid $5.1 billion, $2.6 billion is the engineer's estimate again. Memorex Enterprise bid 12% above the engineer's estimate. Correa and Correa Limited bid 17% below the engineer's estimate. Jagmohan Construction bid 18% below the engineer's estimate. Arjun Construction Inc. bid 21% below the engineer's estimate, and Carriers 22% below the engineer's estimate. So clearly, KRA's bid was the lowest of all of the 8 bids. So we established that they're the lowest bid. So apparently, Korea sent a letter to the PPC to say that in the bid document that there was a paragraph which says that any company that bid 20% below the engineer's estimate and above will not get the contract. But the difference between Korea, Jagmon, and KRAS, there are about a 4 percentage point difference between how they bid below the engineer's estimate. So I asked the tender board, why was this, if it's in the document, the bid document, then you have to evaluate in accordance with that criteria. So you should look at the release that they said. First of all, that the standard bidding document, there is a standard bidding document, and that should be used by every single government entity that was established by us in the past. There are 19 criteria. 19 criteria that you can use. We had discontinued when this was done years ago a percentage below the engineer's estimate as disqualifying any bidder. So this is the standard bidding document of the government with a list of 19 criteria. If you look at the Procurement Act, the Procurement Act says that anytime a ministry or a department or anyone tries to change the standard bidding document, they have to seek the approval of the National Tender Board. And the reason why this is so, that every government agency can then start putting in their own criteria for evaluation of bids, and then you have chaos in the system. So everyone is supposed to use the standard bid documents. This criterion is not part of the standard bid document, yet it found its way into the GDF the request for proposals. So if they wanted that in, they had to seek the approval of the tender board. Now, if you allow this to go through, every single government agency can corruptly insert their own criterion for qualifying or disqualifying bidders away from the standard bid document and then award to anyone. They can say, we don't like how you look, you have to be of a particular size, or you must be over 200 pounds or 50 pounds, and put that in the bid document. That's not the way our procurement is used. So the MPTAB is within its full rights to say, you departed from the standard bid document. You had to seek by law. The Procurement Act of Ghana, section 23.3 says, each such tender board shall prepare using such standardized forms and criteria as have been prepared by the National Board, solicitation documents for tenders subject to its jurisdiction, and may, with the approval of the National Board, make such minor alterations or modifications to the forms and criteria as are deemed necessary on a case-by-case basis. The GDF didn't do this. So the tender board is right in this case to say you inserted a criterion that's not part of the standard criterion and therefore should not be used in the evaluation. But what I found strange here is that In the bid document, the tender board just issued a release. They're saying in the bid document, the engineer's estimate was not even published. So how come you know that you were 20% or above the engineer's estimate if it was not published in the bid document? So this is not corruption. First of all, the contract was awarded to the lowest bidder in a public tender. What we have is a departure from what is the standardized form of bidding. And if we talk, this is what we keep saying over and over again, that many entities, they do this on their own, and sometimes it's not even picked up by the cabinet or the tender board. They would, when this goes to cabinet, it will go as the lowest bidder won this document, the contract here. So I'm hoping that the people who are looking into this would pay attention to all these matters. Departure from standard bidding document. And we now have to take a strong disciplinary approach to these agencies that do procurement out in the public domain that depart from the standardized process. The standardized process was created for a purpose, and the purpose was to ensure that we don't have multiple bids or solicitation for bids that are different in each of these agencies that can prejudice the process. We work at this for a very long time, but people sometimes they change this conveniently. So if you know of the battle that we have to ensure that this happens as the executive, as the party, because there are multiple agencies that consistently do this. And we have fought this, and because of our fight against it, we have managed to keep most of these contracts outside of corrupt practices because of the battle that we constantly wage. Every week we have to do this. So when they say it's with the complicity of the government that it just shows. I was hoping that all of this would have come out in the news article. But what came out? Oh, the PPP is corrupt. The PPP is corrupt, and you know, you might have to get sanctions here. We're not worried about that. We're not worried about that, but that the PPP is corrupt. Not that we're fighting to ensure every single day that the standardized documents are used, that the bid process is fair, because there are hundreds literally of bidding process taking place simultaneously in government departments, in regions, at the ministerial level, at the national level, in the semi-autonomous agencies, in the statutory bodies. You have to be superhuman to every single day be able to go and check every one of these contracts to see that they're all, the tens of thousands of contracts, to see that they all comply with the rule. In this case, how come did this obsolete criterion that we had discontinued 10 years, 15 years ago, suddenly, that's not in the standard document, suddenly become part of the bid document? And it's nonsensical in light of the fact that the engineer's estimate was not even shared. You think this was authorized by the executive or the PPP? No, but what is clear is that there was an open public tender, and we awarded to the lowest bid. You would have had another issue if we had awarded it at $5 billion when the engineer's estimate is $2 billion. That would have been a big issue. But here, it's the lowest bid. We can go on almost in every agency. Every week we're making changes. You're going to hear more about some of these changes in the short term. We've already been reading the Riot Act to many of the people in the regions, the procurement officers. We made it clear that if you violate this, particularly deliberately, in this matter, like in this, well, I don't know in this case if it was deliberate or it's just an oversight, but if you do this, you would face the consequences. I've had to deal with a number of people who come here and they complain. Now, a lot of the complaints that come here too are people jealous about each other. If one man wins the contract, another man wants it. So you have a lot of petty jealousy going on. Like on the roads, from Craig to the Garden of Eden, we have 47 bidders bidding for a few lots, I think 6 lots. And everybody under the sun bidding, and some putting in some prices that you wouldn't believe you can't build a community road for, but they want to build a highway. So 47, you're going to see, it's only 6 because you can only get 1 lot each. So when you award to the 6, you got 41 other bidders who would think that they had to get it, but you can only award to 6. And it's very competitive. You saw when they opened the bids, all of the names there. So people who never built road, they want to now build a highway and expect to be evaluated at the same rate. You could almost never win in this sort of situation because the 41 others always have something to say sometimes. And some of them have work in other areas that they're not doing well on and still would press ahead with this. So we're not going to be on the defensive on these matters. Kaichou News, now I see the Starbuck News, Join the Crusade, and a few others. Every week, they don't want to talk about growth in disposable income or expansion of healthcare and education or more jobs for people or more housing, because those things show the PPP in a positive light. They only want to talk about one. Why didn't this person get the contract? Why did carers get awarded this? But they're not talking about the tens of thousands of other contracts that are done properly. They don't want to do that. We're proud of our record, but we still have challenges every day to make sure that the system works. And we are not going to let up on this matter. It would be an interesting test case to look at this document here. And we're going to share all of this. I hope that you can examine this carefully and as we move forward. I noticed the attempt of the AFC in particular to try to bait us into somehow giving relevance to Nigel Hughes. So sometime in the distant past, I'd said that the AFC is useless, a view that I hold until today, that they were the most corrupt party, that they seem like a family party now, and they're irrelevant. So I think Nigel Hughes, with his faltering campaign and his fear that he may be beaten, now suddenly is seeking to drag me into the whole, should I say hullabaloo, all of what they're going on with, the nastiness that they're engaged in. So I noticed their press release on June 25th, referring to a statement I made in the distant past, and 3/4 of this press release is like about me and the PPP. I think he's trying to bait me into talking about him, Nigel Hughes. And if he wants it, you know my views of him. I think he is spineless, and I think he has been a force for division in the country, and I think he's opportunistic, even within his own party. Opportunistic, you know, suddenly appears and wants to be leader, and his wife promoting him, and his friends promoting him, Patterson, and Trotman has reemerged, and all. What kind of party is that? And they talk about the PPP. But I'm not going to get into their fight. Let them sort it out themselves. The country, through their own fight, will see the true nature of these parties, the extent to which they are willing to go to bring each other down. They can never give leadership at the national level. These people are inherently undemocratic and have no integrity whatsoever. I just want to continue again with this, lest we forget the shameless thing. This week, I think it's for Amerindian communities. They established 2,700 small businesses in Amerindian villages. Now we have about 200 Amerindian villages. So if you establish 2,700 small businesses in these communities, you have to have over maybe 10 of these in each village. You ask the people which 10 per community they have. These people are crazy. I can't imagine you have a political party saying this nonsense. 2,700 small businesses established in Amerindian villages. The Amerindian villages should be booming by now, you know, and 2,131 startup grants disbursed in these villages. We know where the money went, you know. You remember Vincent Henry from the SLED program? He got $165 million to distribute, the same MP, to the Amerindian villages. It didn't go directly to them. He was the one in charge to distribute. Well, he distributed it well. You know what I mean. And they're $2.5 billion budgeted in 5 years. That's like half of a 1 year's budget under the PPP. They forgot, and they train 4,000 young people. They forgot all the people that they fired, the 2,000, etc. So I don't know who will in his right mind believe anything that APNO or the AFC put out. You have to be a peculiar sort of person. A peculiar sort of person. I don't want to say bad things about mental health people, but you have to, if you believe these things, you really need serious examination. We could arrange it, but you need serious examination. Whoever puts out this sort of thing, and more so the people who believe this sort of thing. I can't imagine it. I'm going to end there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Vice President Kimal King. For Oil Now, could I ask you, recently we saw that CGX Energy said it submitted a notice of potential commercial interest to the government in its Wade discovery offshore Guyana. And CGX's appraisal program for that block is set to come to an end on Friday. So I'm trying to get an idea of what the government's going to do with respect to that notice submitted.
So yesterday I got a call from the minister, and he told me that they had received this notice. I have not examined it as yet, but we'll do so, and next week it will go to the cabinet. But let me make it clear. CGX will not play the government of Guyana. For a very long time, they've been jerking people's string. Maybe they're investors, but no longer are we going to be tolerant of any ambiguity. If they are declaring commerciality now, they have to show in specific terms how they intend to develop a project and where the finances are. But so I shouldn't be so blunt, but I am blunt about this now. We have given them time to, as per the law, to do all they had to do. But this is the crunch time now. If they now are saying they're moving to a project, they have to show us what this project is and show us how they're going to finance the project.
Okay, thank you. Just one other question concerning CGX. Concerning the Bures Deepwater Port, there have been quite a few delays with the completion of this port. How are your discussions, government discussions with CGX on the completion of this port going? I'm sure the government wants the port to be completed so that it can start to surface the oil sector offshore and so on. So
first of all, it's not a deepwater port because it's built on the river itself. The draft there would not allow you to have big vessels go in. It was to service their operations. When CGX started, they had about 55 acres of land to build this facility. We then reduced it, I think, to 25 acres. And they made a commitment several years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that they will complete this project. They've been unable to complete it as yet. So in light of the fact that they've now declared commerciality, well, I've not seen the letter as yet, but
commercial interest, which is not yet commerciality.
Right. Yeah. So we have to see whether they are prepared to move to a project. If they're moving to a project, then they would still need that facility. If there is no project, we'd have to engage them on what happens there. What happens there. So we're going to be inviting them in for a meeting, but next week we will go to the cabinet to seek guidance on this matter.
Okay, just one more thing on that. I understand that the port would also have uses in terms of being a point for exports coming out from Brazil, and also...
No, nothing of that sort. It cannot. If you look at that port, it's 25 acres, and it is, it's in relatively shallow waters because it's on the river itself. And so the project that we've been speaking of, the deepwater port connected to Brazil with a road and rail link and possibly transmission mains to sell power in northern Brazil, is a very different project than this one. This project was designed to service their operations. It's like almost a shore-based facility. but not a deep water port. And it's in no way connected to Brazil. The concept of having Brazilian export go through that port.
Okay, I'd just like to ask you, with respect to the auction, if there has been any move forward on the award to the Total Energies Consortium that Cabinet had approved?
Yeah. No, the discussions are ongoing, but I think they're nearing completion.
What about the others who have not moved yet to that stage?
They still, some for various reasons, some can't find the partners, some can't raise the fees, you know, the substantial fees they have to pay, the signing bonus. And with the Exxon Group, I think it's mainly about some of the conditions, particularly the non-fiscal conditions. So these have not been concluded as yet until the partners from the other side, they're ready to move, particularly with those who have difficulties finding the right partners and raising the fees. If they can't do so, we're not going to conclude with them. We might just have to abandon the process.
Well, the government has been saying that at some point it would consider a second auction. Do you see the time taken to complete these awards as having any impact on confidence in the government's ability to manage an auction?
It's not the ability to manage the auction. I think that several things are impacting this. One, it's the era, the era now that people are, particularly the large companies, are very selective in the 70 odd auctions that are taking place around the world in how they get involved. Two, so that's one. Two, the capacity to finance exploration activities at this stage has been diminished seriously globally. Thirdly, people, particularly with IEA estimating peak oil at 2030, that a lot of people believe that if they explore even now and they find reserves, that these will be stranded, that you may not be able to develop them, move to a project, even if you discover. So the international environment is impacting the auctions globally in a serious manner. And then also in Guyana's case, our regime, the PSA, is not as lucrative as the Stabroek one. So in the past, maybe if they had such a lucrative, or not in the past, if they had the same Stabroek kind of terms, you would have had probably more bidders. But we have changed that. We have changed the royalty rate now from 2% to 10%, the corporate tax from 0 to 10%, and using only 65% for cost recovery. So that, in a way, has made our regime a little bit less attractive globally, but we're assured still competitive.
On behalf of Reuters, I saw that the government put out a press release explaining its selection of the firm Fulcrum LNG to partner with the government and Exxon on the potential gas project. First off, with respect to the government's role in this, how involved do you see that potentially being? For example, does the government see itself at any point maybe considering investing in this project?
This is a risky project because it's a multi-billion dollars project. If you look at what's happening globally in the markets for gas, LNG, the United States has been expanding production. And if there is a change in administration in the United States of America, we anticipate that this will increase even further, not just production, but the facilities that President Biden has not given approval for the LNG export facilities, that those may receive approval from the government there. We've seen Qatar now even expanding its project even further in a bigger way. So there are lots of projects of a similar nature around the world. We're not sure about future demand for gas, although many people believe that gas will still long into the future be a transitional fuel, and therefore the demand will still be high. So we made it clear from the beginning, we want to monetize the gas that is currently in the wells, not being utilized, but being just there because they're associated gas. We're now just extracting oil and we're reinjecting some of this gas. We want to monetize this so that we add to the revenue stream that comes from the production of oil another stream of revenue that comes from the utilization of our gas reserves. Exxon's initial position is that they need to reinject all of this gas to maintain the quality of the wells and the flow. Our view is different. We believe that you can do that. You can maintain the oil production and still you monetize even part of the gas. So we had a different view from Exxon. At the beginning, they said that's not a priority. The priority is production of oil for them. So they were not giving it enough attention. So we said to them, you have to do this, you have to do the studies, and if the assets that you have, that where you found gas, if you're not going to utilizing these, primarily gas, like Haimara and Pluma, if you're not going to utilize these, then you should give them up for individual companies to see if they can't independently develop a project to utilize the gas, to monetize the gas. Exxon has now come back and said to us, we're taking this seriously, we're doing all of the studies, we want to work with the government in keeping with the national objective of monetizing the gas. So but we made it clear that we wanted this to be accelerated. And we don't want it all necessarily to come out of the cost bank from the Stabroek project. So to do that, we have to find another partner who may be able to come to the table to either develop the project on their own, which is less desirable, or jointly with the consortium and the government of Guyana being part of the tripartite arrangement to move this along. In keeping with that view, we went out to a public tender. In the public tender, we outlined all of the things that we wanted done. So what we wanted submitted. Now we name a group of evaluators. They evaluated the bids on the basis of their submissions. I see the question about this guy, Jesus Brancalo, that he was working for Exxon in the past, and now he's out of their company, and now he was the lead in this project. But so when the proposal was made, From what I gleaned from the evaluators and their report, they were supposed to rank companies on the basis of the proposal. The most comprehensive proposal came from Fulcrum. And they had some of the top US companies, Fulcrum, as their partners. You had McDermott, who's the lead contractor and as part of this company. You had Baker Hughes as part of this company. ERM on the as environmental consultant, the Solaris, and other agencies associated. These are some of the top companies in the world. And they also identify potential sources of financing these activities, either through US Exim Bank, but also they represent that private equity firms may be interested in this. They had clearly the best proposal. We didn't see any conflict of interest in this regard because from what I'm told, that the evaluators knew right from the beginning that this gentleman was part of the proposal. So that company was selected. Sinuk, that had a good proposal too, but Sinuk is part of the Exxon consortium. They were ranked number 2. And then another group ranked number 3. So this is the ranking. So now this company has to sit with ExxonMobil and the government of Guyana, first of all, to examine whether this project is feasible and then the configuration of the project. At this stage, we don't have any intention to participate financially. That's a question you asked me. We don't, as ownership, because it means putting aside large sums of money into the venture, which we don't have. And secondly, it's a risky undertaking. So we hope that we will get a stream of revenue from one, the utilization of the gas and the allied development that can come with it, and secondly, a stream of revenue from the sale of our share of the gas, which we can't get now if the gas remains as associated gas in the wells. That is how we are approaching this matter. Fully transparent. We've said this to the public many, many times, and that's how we are approaching it.
You mentioned that potential financiers could include the US Exim Bank and some private equity firms.
And others. So I'm just,
and
and others. This is part of their proposal.
Right.
But yeah, so we believe that these are substantive companies that are involved.
Okay, so my question is, in that potential situation in which this company would have to move forward by itself without Exxon, you're satisfied that it would be financially...
We don't believe that is the less desirable of the two options. Mm-hmm. The best option would be to have Exxon involved, because what they can do in the development of some of these wells, particularly where there's more gas, you have a great deal of condensates to oil in those fields that they can monetize. And they will have another stream of revenue. So right now, we're in a collaboration mode. Exxon has said we have moved this up to a priority now. We now have a company that is interested in moving it forward, and the government is there to push it along. Okay? And that's where the initial discussions are taking place.
Okay, I just want to ask you once more about particularly the question of potential conflict of interest.
Yeah, sure. No
Whether
problem.
the idea that this executive who has founded Fulcrum could have, at Exxon, potentially had access to those data with respect to Exxon's gas discoveries, its potential gas prospects, its reserves, potential drilling locations, estimated development costs? Could those things impact the
so you're
perception?
saying that that's almost a question representing Exxon, because we don't have a conflict of interest. Now, if he has a conflict of interest with Exxon, that's a different matter. If he's bringing proprietary information out of Exxon, then that's Exxon's problem. But I would anticipate if he has knowledge of that information, it helps us to move the process along faster. So we asked, so in Exxon, this was clearly determined to, we sought to find out, and he resigned from Exxon. So they have confirmed that there is no conflict of interest here. They have confirmed that. Exxon has confirmed that there is no conflict of interest here. They said if he had stayed on and was getting benefits from the company, then there would have been a conflict. But he resigned some time ago from Exxon, and therefore there is no conflict of interest. Now, if he has knowledge of what Exxon was doing and all the gas finds and stuff, that may help us to move this process along faster. Now, people raise questions about startups. This is a startup. Right, a new company. They're saying, oh, this company just got incorporated. But when you look at the partners, ERM, Solaris, McDormand, Baker Hughes, these are massive companies. So look at the history of startups in the United States of America, and you will see I have a list of about 15 startups here that have moved on to develop huge projects in the US. It's just, it is a standard thing in the world. But in Guyana, you know, sometimes that becomes an issue. So we are not worried, because when we look at the companies that are part of this startup, they're substantive in nature and have enormous experience in these areas. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo from Kaiser News. Just on a follow-up on Kimal's question, I heard you mention there is value in condensates. I heard the president mentioned as well.
What?
The condensates, to monetize the condensates. Is that being reinjected back as well with the gas right now, as we don't have the plan, or is the oil companies making use of it at that time? Because I heard it's a valuable...
condensate is oil. Oil, so if you go to a field like Pluma, then you will take out the oil, you're getting the gas out, but in that field, the gas to oil ratio may be lower than in another field where there's a higher ratio of oil to gas. In that field, Pluma and Aymara, you'd have a lower gas to oil ratio, but you still have oil. So if you, on their own, if you're going only after oil, you may not develop that field or those fields. But if you're going after gas now, monetizing the gas from those fields, you also get the benefit of the oil, the condensates I'm talking about. So that is what we're looking at.
My second question, does the government have powers to reach over in the US and sanction anyone? And the reason why I'm asking is you've mentioned, and you have accused Rick Ford and these guys of criminal activities. Does the government have similar powers like the US to stop him from working and stop him from doing business in the US, or any other citizen that, you know? Can we do that?
No, the thing is that, so we can say, assuming our Treasury does some sanction for someone individually. So we don't, these are done under different pieces of legislation. I think in this case is the Magnitsky Act that they do it under. So the US has a specific act that is then supervised by the Treasury Department that they will enforce. And so I think that this act was used in this case. We don't have a comparable law in Guyana. We don't have a comparable law. So what the US believes is that if it puts the US financial system at risk for illicit money, they can do this. So that is why they would sanction their own individuals or any transactions in the United States of America. So in the release that the United States made, I think it was a couple Tuesdays ago when their first release came out, they separated out what would happen to US nationals. So US nationals will face sanctions if they engage with the sanctioned individuals. They then said people who are transiting the United States would also potentially face sanctions. And then the third category was financial institutions in Guyana and individuals who have financial transactions with the sanctioned individuals may face sanctions. But nobody wants to face the sanctions here in Guyana, because if a financial institution had to face sanction, they would lose access to very important things. For example, a bank needs the SWIFT arrangement to transfer money. If they lose that access, if they lose access to a US correspondent bank, then they effectively can't set up an LC, they can't transfer funds, they become basically stymied in their work. So it is that risk. They didn't sanction the Guyanese, but they said you may be sanctioned. So that's, if you look at it carefully. However, in Guyana, in our case, we don't have a specific law of that, a law of that nature. And then even Rickford Berg, the criminal, he is entitled to due process. It's just that he's evading it. He's hiding out in the US. But as a Guyanese, I don't know, he's been living in the US so long if he's still Guyanese. But he's entitled to due process in our court system. And we will defend that. We'll defend it even for Rickford Berg. Because we're not a cake shop country. We believe that people have a right to defense in their thing. So he was charged with extortion. He was served. He went to the High Court to try to block his appearance in person. I think that matter now was dismissed. Was it dismissed? I think it was dismissed, right? Or it's being heard. And when it finishes there, he'd have to come back and face the courts. And if he's convicted here, then you can issue a warrant for him, because on the basis of the conviction. But people know that they have a bunch of them now, they're crooks. And trust me, they're getting away with lots of things now. But there would be a day of reckoning. A day of reckoning. They think that all they're doing, it goes unnoticed, because a lot of them are engaged in illegal practices in the United States of America. And they think that they're going unnoticed and there'd be no reckoning. And therefore, they should be cautious. And you know, I don't respond too much to the nonsense that they post from time to time, because really, these are crooks of the highest quality, some of these people there. But the business people in this country should also protect themselves. They vilify business people every single day. I shudder to think if you have a family and you're working hard because some extortionists want your money, they keep posting your name all the time. They should take action against these individuals. And there will be. So someday, hopefully, that this would happen. So the day of reckoning will come later. But getting back to your question, we can't do the same thing. They operate under this, I think it's a Magnitsky Act. That is what the sanctions came under.
And finally, has the government been able to clarify the full implications of the Mohammed sanctions here in Guyana of the government, or still awaiting additional information?
So when the president spoke, he indicated that we had an initial report from the central bank and FIU, and our exposure in the financial system is limited. The deposits are a negligible part of our total deposits. And since you mentioned deposits, you know, we're talking about disposable income in Guyana. We from 2019, 2020 to now, the aggregate deposits in the banking system by individuals, not companies, these are Guyanese individuals, has grown by 650 million or 630 million US dollars. That is how much more people have in their savings account in Guyana now. 630 million US dollars is a lot of money, and people ask about disposable income and spending power. It's not the companies. It's not companies, just individuals. That's the growth in aggregate deposit. You should check it. So all of these things add up. Okay.
Good afternoon, Trina Williams, Guyana Chronicle.
Yeah.
I just have one question. Recently, the Jamaican Prime Minister would have said that their government is clamping down on the spread of fake news. And I know that earlier you referenced the president's press conference and said that there was a major distortion of what he was talking about.
Yeah.
My question to you is, what is your government doing to take a firmer approach to the spread of misinformation out there?
The thing is that it is like it's a sad thing, because the last week has been almost all the vilification of the president. And I'm accustomed to it. Every day they do that to me, and it goes on, so it doesn't bother me too much. But you had a unique opportunity here. You've been calling for the president to speak. He spoke extensively about various sectors. Please do him the courtesy of reporting what he said, even if you want to talk about other things. But it's totally lopsided. There was practically no coverage of the substantive things. We're not looking to control or direct media or reporters. We believe in independence, but reporters too have to also have some integrity and honesty when they come to the press conferences. You can't come with an agenda. You know, you have to come to the press conferences with the idea that you want to portray the truth to your readers. And that is what we have a duty. Why do you think I hold this press conference on a weekly basis? Because if we don't respond to all of these things, like on procurement, you will think we're totally corrupt, everybody getting only a few people getting contracts who are aligned to the PPP. Half of the people I saw, the same people we're defending now, was paying for Sandra Granger to go, well, not paying, hosted an activity for Sandra Granger to go to speak to some others. I was told about this. And now we're defending them because they're Guyanese, not they're pro-PPP. They get a contract now, and suddenly they become pro-PPP, if you check in the 5 years, some of these people were in bosom with the app. No, I'm not saying that Sandra Granger was involved in anything. I don't want to disparage her. But I'm just saying that they were close to the last government. And we end up having to defend them now because they get a contract. And so we now, we didn't come out every week and try to tackle this, you would still think, if the Kaichou News, that we own Marriott, we didn't do anything on the oil and gas sector since we got into office. They talk about transparency. We've published every environmental permit. We've published every license for the PSA. We publish updates on the website. We have published all the new laws that we've passed. We now have a local content law. Nothing has happened, you would think, because one man has an obsession with politics, using this industry, portraying us as we're in bed with Exxon. Since we're in bed with Exxon, you think we negotiate the same way like Apnu or Trotman? I see Royce there, Ford, and what's the other one? Nigel Yu is there saying, oh, they're tough now. A lot of these people, where were they in 2016? Where were they in 2016? I think in 2016, Nigel Lewis could, and his firm, maybe would have still been Exxon's lawyer in 2016 when the agreement was signed. Now, to think that another AFC leader signed that, and his company was the law firm that's at least listed there for Exxon, what kind of conflict of interest then? You're both in the same party, you both hold leadership positions or held former leadership position. Your wife is still a sitting minister in the government, and you're the company, you're the lawyer or a local lawyer for Exxon, and you're negotiating with your party leader, who is the minister. How come those things don't get explored now? How come Patterson still gets invited to the Moray House in Stabroek by Stabroek News? They are not concerned that he's charged for several corrupt acts, and the evidence is clear as daylight about what happened? But they get very concerned. There was a breach of some procedure here. Not that we awarded to the highest bidder. It's the lowest bidder got awarded here. Not he's a friend of or a member of the PPP. But it's the duplicity. And therefore, we got to keep doing what we're doing. And the PPP members out there in everywhere, they have to recognize what's happening now. That as we get closer to elections, I see all sorts of people coming out of the woodwork, all the PPP haters, they're regrouping. So you will see them regroup. I saw they're going to different parts of the country now. Imagine the head or a member of the Public Procurement Commission campaigning with Nigel Hughes recently, a member of the Public Procurement Commission, the constitutional body. Just imagine if one of the members representing the government was seen campaigning with the PPP openly. Then people would say, oh, they're not independent. But you have a member of a particular party campaigning with Nigel Hughes who sits on the PPC. How could you get any impartial view there from that person? So why, if they're holier than thou, why didn't we see an editorial in the Stabrook talking about that, or in some of the other papers. They ignore it totally. It's okay for to excuse PNC and AFC corruption, and they are massively corrupt, but then invent stories often about PPP corruption, and they have invented tons of this story. You remember the Kaichor news. I still, up to now, they repeat that I own the Marriott. Many places I went to Canada, a man asked me that. You still own the Marriott here? I went to Canada. A man still own, I still own the Marriott. I had owned airlines. I own everything in this country. Everything. They still repeat this. And they, so we have to defend ourselves.
Has Guyana heard back from our Surinamese counterpart in regards to the 2 fishermen that were being held by the authorities over there?
I must confess that I'm not aware. Just ask the Minister of Public, well, it would be Home Affairs basically. I don't know. I don't know if we've heard back from them, but I can undertake to find out from Robeson.
Just another question. You were in Canada for the past week. Could you share some outcomes of some of your engagements over there?
It's extensive. So I promise when we were campaigning in 2019, I promised to return to Canada. When we win, I didn't get to do so until this year, because I met in 2019 with the diaspora broadly, not just PPP people, but generally with the large meetings in the diaspora to outline what was taking place in our country, some of the ideas that we had in mind to implement, how we were reworking on the ground to basically ensure that we maintain democracy in our country. So I thought it was we needed to give the diaspora update, but from a governmental perspective now, about what we have been doing in the 4 years of our stewardship, starting out from COVID and the challenges we had there to keep our country safe, to the large transformation plans that we have had to put in place in healthcare and education, and how difficult sometimes people from the outside, even here, don't see how hard it is to get a big project going. They think it can just happen overnight. You have to have a concept paper, you have to do a feasibility study, you have to raise the financing, you have to hire the consultants to design, you have to go to contract, you have to get it implemented, you have to supervise the contract. And we have large numbers of projects that are going to change this country. The bridge across the Demerara River, transformational for the 2 regions. The gas to energy project, it's 12 hospitals. All of these things are major that will move the system forward. So outside of the tons of other things, the housing and the incentive regime changes, the reduction of taxes to incentivize certain activities that have led to investment boom, say in the health sector and education, because of no corporate tax policy that we introduced in 2020. We've seen that. So I just wanted people to get a full picture of all that we've been engaged in 5 years or 4 years in government, because sometimes they don't see that. This country has a way of not looking at those things. Every day it's about something, a man loses his finger or something else, and you don't look at that. But that is what it takes to move a country forward. APNU has no capacity for doing that. They demonstrated this in the 28 years in office as well as the 5 years. They have a capacity to trade barbs and every day make promises that are, let you see in the promises. But they have no capacity to do that kind of work. And therefore, that is what I wanted to share with the diaspora, to go out, re-engage them, but also for a sense of realism, because sometimes our people out there, like I said at the conference, if they have a business proposal, they want to see Peter Ramsarup from the Go Invest. One man said to me, I have a business, how would I see the president? And I said, but you don't need to see the president when you come with your business proposal. Go Invest, learn about the incentive regime. You can do that online. They're all there. Go Invest, you don't need to see the head. There's a desk, put in your proposal. Many people from other parts of the world, they already do this. So our diaspora sometimes think that, or some members, if they don't get to see a politician, that they can't move forward with their project. But we are trying to strengthen the systems. We want the systems to work. So irrespective of meeting a politician or not, you can get your business addressed. And that is what we've been working on, strengthening various systems across the country. So that's a kind of perspective that I wanted to share there.
Hi,
Okay, yes.
Josiah Williams, NCN News. The Carter Center was recently here, and they met with Prime Minister Mark Phillips. Have they shared any concerns for the need for election observers for 2025?
Oh, no. The Carter Center was invited by the government of Guyana. They received a letter to observe the 2025 elections. We've invited the European Union, etc. So they're here pursuant to that invitation. They're meeting with various people. They're scheduled to meet with the president this afternoon. I may meet them tomorrow if I don't join the president today. But it's pursuant to that invitation.
Dr. Jagdeo, the critic for Daybreak News. 2 questions. It seems that the degeneration of Glenlal's gray matter has caused him to be fixated on Tupui Group, a company that I'm affiliated with. Like if I'm the only contractor in Guyana. To put things into context, can you give the citizenry an understanding of the contracts out there, the kind of amounts dedicated to infrastructure development over the last few years, and like foreign companies, there are Trinidadian companies here, there are Chinese companies here, and most of the companies that garner the biggest quantities of money from contracts in infrastructure development are actually foreign companies. Can you give some context to that?
Yeah, well, you have a duty also to defend your own company, right? Because often when the government puts out this information, it's seen as defending corruption, and that is how they want it portrayed. Now, the question is, you mentioned about their foreign companies getting contracts. The contracts, if we utilize bilateral resources. In some cases, like Chinese resources, then you're required to hire a Chinese company. Particularly if you get concessional resources from China. So say for example, China Exim Bank would lend you at below 2% interest rate, but you're required to hire Chinese contract. So like on the East Coast Road, the 4-lane road from Mahaika to Sheriff Street, that is financed from a loan from China. And therefore a Chinese company won it through a competitive bid or a selective bid of only Chinese companies, because you couldn't include a non-Chinese company. It would fall outside of the scope of financing. That's one. They're similar to the Indian company in the Ogle bypass. It's a combination of financing from the Indian government and versus and part of it from the Guyana government. So there are contracts of that nature where the aid is tied. In cases where we finance loans from multilateral agencies, for example, the Islamic Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, World Bank, etc., the member states of those institutions are allowed to bid. So if you have an American company, or the US is part of the Inter-American Development Bank, they can bid. The Chinese are part of it. So they can also bid. And in this case, they bid, and then we have to also seek a no objection from these institutions to award the contract after the bid process takes place and the evaluation is done. So, for example, paving and widening the East Bank Road from around the stadium area all the way to the airport. We're widening it in a small way, about 2 feet on both sides, and repaving the road outside of the work we're doing on the parallel road, the 4-lane road. That is financed from the Inter-American Development Bank. A Chinese contractor won that bid. So the one where for example, the Linden-Soesdijk Highway, which is financed from the Islamic Development Bank, again, you have contractors. So it's a joint venture between a Trinidad company and a Guyanese company that won that project. They were the most responsive. And we had to seek the no objection from the Islamic Development Bank. They do their own evaluation too. So if our evaluation differs from there's a problem. So then we seek the no objection. That's good. So on the gas to energy project, that went through a public bid. An American company won that, $700 and something million. That is to build the power plant and the NGL facility. So these are some things that are happening. The bridge across the river, again, that was a public tender, but the contractors had to bring financing. So after the public tender, which was done by the government, the Chinese company won the bid, but we tied up a loan from China. So these are, many people believe that's external. There are lots of projects being funded now by the budget. So all the village roads are being funded by the budget. All the village roads and the city, etc. We've said, as far as possible, our instructions are that we must stick, because we had complaints from Region 10 that there were contractors who were coming out from the region and getting work there. The instruction has been to have a competitive, clean process, but try to give preference in every one of the regions through the regional budget to regional contractors, so that we have a growth in the regional contractors. And like in Region 10 now, almost all the roads that we're doing, nearly $2 billion go to contractors from the region. Similarly in Bures and other parts. We discovered only recently that Region 1 was not doing this, and I had a discussion with them, so they're shifted now. So you build regional capacity, and this is mainly for the small project. But there are lots of other. This 4-lane road is funded purely from the budget. So mostly Guyanese contractors are getting this now. But you need also to do a good quality project. So there are billions of dollars of projects to literally thousands of contractors in the country, thousands of contractors. That's why I'm saying the scale of what's happening is not represented. So we're spending on housing alone $200 billion we've spent. $200 billion from the time we got back to now. So when you look at one person getting a contract there for $1 billion, that's one or maybe $500 million. If you had to give everyone a $500 million contract in housing, you're talking about 400 different contractors that would have to work. Although there's some seems high, but it is, you have a lot of things being done right across the country. Now, you have to defend yourself. We're tightening up, and what we're planning to do, because we have this problem at the cabinet itself. When a paper goes to the cabinet, often the cabinet doesn't see all of the work that people have in different agencies. So we're now going to introduce a pre-qualification system, maybe starting from a threshold of say 50 million and above. So if you're pre-qualified to do work up to $500 million, and you get one contract, and you're at $450 million, when they go to the cabinet paper goes there, it will say, this contractor was pre-qualified for $500 million, already has a contract for $450 million. Therefore, the cabinet will say immediately, you can't give another contract for 200 or 300 million because they have reached their capacity. And so that is what we're starting to introduce now, a countrywide, you're going to see more about it, a countrywide pre-qualification system that will match capacity, and then all of the agencies of the government will have to report to the center or through a website about work that people have everywhere, so that the cabinet, the government can have a full picture, that because you don't know if a man is working for multiple ministries now. So when you hear that, it's a surprise sometimes. That is their system. So we are constantly trying to upgrade the system. But trust me, what is happening now under the PPP never happened under APNU. The open bidding process, the evaluation of bids, the documents there that we can supply, you think that ever happened there? They just called in people and give them the work. The strengthening of the procurement system has been major. But I would suggest you deal with Glenlal yourself, and don't, we have our own battle with him. He's becoming a politician, so I'll deal with him later. Yeah.
Just to follow up to the same question, Dr. Jagdeo.
Then you will hear about all the sordid things that he has done.
In light of this special circumstances created around foreign companies and their finances and their number of different circumstances, does government see the need to look back at the public procurement process? Because of the fact sometimes it seems to be one of the things that stymie development. I think the process has come from a past time where funds were tight and everything else. Do you see the need to adjust it maybe upward or downward to suit the new productive environment?
So clearly the need to do that, but it's a robust system. If you look at our Procurement Act, you look around the Caribbean, it should start with that. The Starbuck News should examine our act in relation to any country in this part of the world or in the Commonwealth, and compare the features of our act with any country. I worked on that Procurement Act a long time back. We used to do procurement in the period, the 28 years under APNU, without an act in place, where you were using some regulations from the 1950s and a few Secretary to the Treasury memoranda. No act. We put in place in that act the standard bidding regulations for standard bidding document, the right of appeal, the requirement that they publicize the awards, which they have not been doing with frequency and they need to do. The right to publicize the awards. They resort to the court if you're not happy with the appeal. We put in place the PPC, which even is a third layer, a constitutional layer to examine all of these processes. So we have a robust law. Half of the people who evaluate this have never read the act. That is why they don't even know the procurement system we have to go through, that are different for each depending on the source of the capital. Like I just explained, if it's bilateral, it has to go through one process. If it's multilateral, it goes through another source. If it's from the Treasury, it's a third set of criteria that you have to use. I see people talk about procurement and they have no clue, including write about it. And so my point is that it's a robust system. We don't need to change the system. We need to get people to adhere to it. And sometimes we have corruptly, and it's true, we have some people corruptly trying to undermine the system so that they can get past with their illegalities. And that's what we have to now police the system better. And that's some of the things I'm saying. How in heaven's name would, in this KRS bid, how in heaven's name will you put in place a criterion that was discontinued a long time back, is not part of the standard bidding document? And the law says that if any agency wants to change the standard bidding document, they have to get the approval of the tender board, the MPTAB. It's a violation of the law. And then we get heat for it. But the good thing about it is that it ended up with the person who bid the lowest getting the work. So not like APNU. Sometimes, well, they didn't even go through bid, but they just call in somebody and give them to work. I have numerous instances of that. They just call in, you go to the office of the president with something, a little bag, and you emerge with big contracts. That is how it used to be. Right, but you got to defend yourself. Don't wait on government. You deal with Glenlal. Yes.
Dr. Jagdeo, I know you tried to brush aside the Nigel Hughes conversation, maybe with intention of not promoting him at this wide platform. But the dangers of a Nigel Hughes is real. Every past opportunity that Nigel Hughes would have been given to express leadership qualities outside of being a lawyer was followed by major disruption. We know in the Henry Boyce case, riots. We know after the no confidence motion, Nigel Hughes created an atmosphere that created confusion in this country for 2.5 years. Is the PPP worried about someone like Nigel Hughes getting a leadership position where he could really wreak havoc in this country? Is the PPP cognizant of such?
We're not worried about any of these people because, trust me, whoever emerges from this, their internal leadership battle, but particularly a Nigel Hughes. And I see, anyhow, I'm trying to stay away from him. But we'd have a field day when we point out all the things that he was engaged in. So we don't have any fear of a Nigel Hughes. I saw him trying to portray that, the PPP is worried about if he is leading the AFC, etc. This is a political party would love a candidate like Nigel Hughes to contest against. Would love a candidate. I can list 15 things here that would disqualify him from any running even for a party position, much less a national position. But I'm saving that for another day. I'm saving that for another day. I don't want to get in their internal battle. I'm saving that for another day. So leave them alone. And leave Norton to deal with his own business. And the others, the nastiness that's going on in that party too. But you see it yourself, you're following it every day. You see what's happening in these parties. How could they ever lead country? I saw there's a court case trying to block their Congress. And let me wish them well for their Congress. Since I wish them well, I hope everything goes smoothly, no fighting, right? No, but they file a court case to block their APNU's Congress. And I saw my name and the PPP involved in their case too. I don't understand why this what we got to do with the PNC's Congress. We did our Congress, we had our Congress, you saw it, then open, and suddenly I'm scanning through this news story and I'm trying to get the pleadings, the document that was filed. I haven't seen it as yet, but I may have to go to court for the APNU Congress to give evidence as to why their Congress should take place or not take place.
Well, it might be as a direct result of Vincent Alexander input in the election and your understanding of his input in the last elections and attempt to rig the last elections. You might be called as a witness on behalf of that.
I don't know about that, but I don't think this has anything to do with I don't think this has anything to do with the national elections, but this kind of DNA to rig is hard to get past that. However, please take me out of your case that you have. I'm just a little bit tired now. I have to go to court to respond to why the PNC Congress must be held or not held. Yes, thank you. Ask the question, leave her alone. All right, give her. I don't want her to say I'm harassing you, so please. All right, yeah, she's a young reporter, so.
Okay, good afternoon, Selena Natu with Kaitro News. I just have one question for you.
Yeah, sure.
With oil production expected to reach 1 million barrels per day by the turn of the decade, are you concerned about the capacity of the government to monitor this increased output? And what plans does the government have to improve real-time monitoring of production by 2030?
Okay, so it's actually not a million. It's more. By 2027, we're hoping we get up to about 1.3 million barrels per day, and it's a good question. And capacity building has several elements. So I explained in the beginning that we had to work at putting the framework in place for regulating the sector, which we have practically done through the implementation of the Petroleum Activities Bill, reform of the NRF, the local content law, the new regulations concerning environmental permits, etc., the flaring, the tax on flaring, a whole range of those issues we've worked on. So now it's time to focus heavily on monitoring. So Exxon would have a unit in their headquarters that would do real-time monitoring. of what's going on offshore. We will have a presence there. We would also have our own unit to track what's going on offshore. We'll have to strengthen the Bureau of Standards presence there and their sophistication on the rig themselves to measure quantities of oil and the flow and water capacity that's being discharged. All of these things, not the water capacity, but the discharge water, whether they're meeting the international standards for purifying that. All of that would be done as we move forward, so we can verify that what they are actually saying is true. We now use some other mechanisms that are useful in the absence of that robust kind of on-site presence in a comprehensive way, but those need to be enhanced. So I have no doubt that over the next few years we will substantively increase our capacity to do that, to monitor production. Okay, thank you.